A tiny hidden camera on Damian Pierce's chest is recording every cruel word from Sergeant Silas Croft inside Rusty's diner. Croft abuses his power, knocks over 8-year-old Ava's plate, and orders the black father to get out. He doesn't know he is ending his career by confronting the state's chief internal affairs investigator. Damian's search for evidence is a dangerous game of facing guns, corrupt local cops, and constant fear for his daughter. Will the state tactical team crush Croft's corrupt network as they close in outside? To understand how this breathless standoff began, we need to go back 3 days. The story starts in a small apartment in Nashville on a quiet Tuesday morning. Damian Pierce stood in his kitchen at 6:13 in the morning. He braided his daughter's hair with slow, careful fingers. Ava sat on a wooden stool, swinging her feet. She hummed a song from her favorite cartoon. The smell of scrambled eggs drifted through the small apartment. Outside, a garbage truck groaned down the street. Damian packed her lunch in a box shaped like a bear. He tucked in a note that said, "You are brave, Ava." She could not read every word yet, but she knew the shape of his handwriting by heart. Their apartment was small, but it felt warm in the morning light. A single photo of Ava's mother sat on the shelf by the window. Damian dusted the frame every day without ever saying why. He checked Ava's backpack twice, making sure her jacket zipper worked. Some mornings felt almost normal, almost easy, almost like before the accident. Those mornings were the ones Damian tried hardest to protect. 2 years earlier, Damian's wife died in a car crash. The driver who hit her was the son of a local police captain. That case never went to trial. The report vanished from a filing cabinet. Damian remembered the exact date, carved forever into his memory. He remembered the officer's careful, practiced apology at the front door. He remembered how quickly the case folder simply disappeared afterward. Damian never forgot the silence that followed. It planted a hard seed of purpose deep inside his chest. That seed grew slowly, quietly, into the career he chose after her death. When Damian left the apartment, he was not the same man who cooked breakfast. He traded his soft apron for a sharp charcoal suit. At the State Office of Professional Integrity, co-workers called him the Ghost. His stakeouts never failed. His silence unsettled even seasoned detectives. That afternoon, his director called him into a locked conference room. It was 4:15 exactly. A thick folder sat on the table, heavier than it looked. The tab read Pinecrest Ridge County. Inside were 11 letters from local families. Each one accused Sergeant Silas Croft of extortion and racial abuse. Every complaint filed with the county sheriff had quietly disappeared. Someone was burying the truth on purpose. Damian flipped through the pages slowly, reading each name out loud. One letter came from a widow who lost her small grocery store. Another came from a farmer who paid Croft every single month. The dates lined up like a pattern no one had noticed before. Every complaint vanished within 2 weeks of being filed. That kind of silence did not happen by accident in any department. "This has gone on 4 years," the director said, tapping the folder. "Local oversight is useless. We need someone inside, someone Croft won't suspect." Damian closed the folder and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "We need an experienced agent to go undercover," the director said. "Someone who can let Croft expose himself on hidden camera. If the mission failed, Damian's real identity would leak. His family would become a target for men who carried badges and broke the law." Damian looked down at a photo of Ava taped to his folder. He shook his head. He could not leave her alone in Nashville for a week. His sister, the usual babysitter, was traveling for work that same week. He walked home just after 7:30 that evening. Ava ran to greet him, holding her stuffed bear tightly. She talked about a classmate at school. Local police had taken her friend's family car for no real reason. That family slept in their car outside a gas station. Ava looked up at him with wide, trusting eyes. "You're a good cop, Dad. You'll protect kids like that, right?" Her small question hit him harder than any threat ever could. Something in his chest tightened, and he could not look away. That night, Damian made his decision. He would take the case, but on one condition. Ava would come, with him, disguised as a simple weekend trip. He would keep her close enough to protect, with his own 2 hands. 3 days later, their SUV rolled into a valley wrapped in gray morning fog. Pinecrest Ridge sat between low mountains, quiet and half-forgotten. The road narrowed, and cell service dropped to a single bar. Ava pressed her face to the window, watching pine trees blur past. "It's spooky here," she whispered, hugging Barney a little tighter. Damien turned the radio down low and kept his eyes on the road. Old billboards leaned crooked along the shoulder, paint peeling in long gray strips. A rusted water tower rose above the tree line, its ladder missing rungs. The air smelled faintly of wet leaves and diesel smoke. Every few miles, a police cruiser sat parked on the shoulder, engine idling. Damien noted each one silently, filing the locations away in his memory. This valley ran on fear, and fear needed constant watching. At 8:15, they stopped at a diner with a rusted tin roof. A crooked sign read Rusty's Diner in faded red paint. The windows were foggy, with old grease and morning steam. His name was Rusty, 68 years old, a Vietnam veteran with tired eyes. He studied Damien's suit for a long second before he spoke. Rusty brought Ava a chocolate donut, free of charge. He winked at her, and she giggled behind her small hands. Then he leaned close to Damien, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Son, folks around here don't take kindly to men who look like you." His hand trembled slightly as he wiped the counter. "Eat quick and get moving before Sergeant Croft walks in. Out here, he thinks he's the whole law." Damien noticed a faded photo taped near the register, a young soldier in uniform. "That's me," Rusty said, following his gaze. "Vietnam, long time ago, but some habits never leave you." "What habits are those?" Damien asked, keeping his voice easy and light. Rusty's eyes went distant for a moment, somewhere far from the diner. "Watching every exit. Trusting my gut about dangerous men." "Croft's dangerous?" Damien asked, careful not to sound too curious. Rusty snorted and shook his head slowly, wiping the same spot again. "Croft's worse than dangerous. He thinks he's untouchable, and that's the problem." Damien thanked him and studied the empty booths near the window. Something in Rusty's warning stayed lodged in his mind for hours. He filed it away, the way he filed every dangerous detail. That night, they checked into a rented cabin near the edge of the forest. The wooden floor creaked under every step, worn smooth by years of use. A faint smell of pine and old smoke filled the small living room. Ava fell asleep quickly, hugging her worn stuffed bear named Barney. Damien pulled a thin blanket over her shoulders and watched her breathe. Then he moved quietly into the kitchen to begin his work. He set up a small radio unit on the kitchen table. He checked the door locks twice, then checked the windows once more. Outside, wind moved through the tall pines with a low, steady hush. He connected a hidden signal device tuned to a private frequency. He checked the tiny angle of a button camera sewn into his jacket. At 11:42, he called his handler, Agent Marcus Vance, on a secure line. "We're in position," Damien said quietly, glancing at his sleeping daughter. "Backup should stay at least 5 miles out for now." Vance agreed, his voice crackling faintly through the old radio. "How's the kid holding up?" Vance asked, his tone softer than usual. "She thinks we're camping," Damien said. "Let's keep it that way as long as we can." Vance promised the tactical team would move fast once the signal came. Damien hung up and watched the porch light flicker against the dark trees. A distant owl called twice, then went silent again. He checked the cabin's locks one more time before sitting down. The next morning brought their first real test. Damien pulled into an old gas station to fill the tank. A deputy named Miller strolled over, tapping his baton against the window glass. Miller demanded license and registration for no clear reason at all. His sunglasses reflected the gas station lights, hiding whatever his eyes were doing. He dragged out every question, staring hard at Ava in the back seat. Damien answered calmly, handing over documents built for his cover story. His pulse beat steady in his neck, though his face stayed perfectly relaxed. Years of training kept his hands from shaking even once. He claimed to be a traveling construction engineer on a short vacation. Miller squinted at the papers, clearly hoping for an excuse to push further. After a long, tense minute, he finally waved them along. Damien's hands stayed steady on the wheel, though his jaw ached from clenching it. He glanced at Ava in the mirror and forced a soft, easy smile. She smiled back, unaware of how close danger had just come. That night, back at the cabin, Damien wrote down every detail he remembered. Miller's badge number, his patrol time, the exact words he used. Small facts like these would matter later in federal court. He also noticed something strange stitched into the pattern of patrols. Deputies changed shifts at odd hours, always avoiding the diner on weekdays. Only Croft came around on Sundays, like a ritual no one questioned. Rusty confirmed it the next morning, wiping down the counter slowly. "Sunday is collection day," he said, not looking up from his rag. "Been that way since before half these deputies were even born." Over the next 2 days, Damien returned to Rusty's diner for coffee. Each visit, Rusty shared another piece of the ugly puzzle. Croft collected cash from local shop owners every single Sunday morning. At 10:45, Croft walked door to door demanding $500. Any owner who refused faced sudden, fake safety violations within the week. Rusty's own diner had barely survived 2 such shutdown threats. One shop owner, a quiet woman named Nadia, whispered her own story to Damien. She ran a small hardware store 2 blocks from the diner. Croft had padlocked her doors twice for fake fire code violations. "I filed a complaint once," Nadia said, glancing nervously toward the street. "It disappeared within a week, just like all the others." She agreed to speak with investigators once the case moved forward. Her small act of courage would matter more than she ever guessed. Every voice added weight to the case, building quietly against Croft. That evening, Damien sat by the cabin window, writing down her statement carefully. He organized the details, matching names to dates from the folder. Slowly, the picture of Croft's operation became sharp and clear. Damien watched Croft humiliate a delivery driver on the sidewalk outside. The driver was an immigrant, quiet, only trying to finish his route. Croft mocked his accent loudly, laughing as a small crowd gathered. Every muscle in Damien's body wanted to step forward and stop it, but he reminded himself why he came to this broken valley. The goal was the biggest fish, not a small, early arrest. One afternoon, Croft bragged loudly at the gas station about his own security cameras. He had installed them himself outside the sheriff's office, proud of the upgrade. "Nobody questions me on my own turf," he told a deputy, laughing. He never once thought those same cameras might work against him someday. Pride like that made men careless, and careless men left trails. Damien noted the camera's angle, without ever slowing his own steps. He needed Croft caught fully, on camera, with no way to deny it. Sunday morning was coming, and with it, the moment everything would change. On Sunday, Damien dressed with quiet precision, choosing a gray tweed jacket. He clipped a small button camera worth over $4,000 near his collar. It would capture everything in sharp, unmistakable detail. He walked Ava into Rusty's diner at 10:15 sharp. He chose booth number 4, near the window with the best morning light. 2 quiet locals sat far in the corner, eyes down at their plates. Rusty spotted Damien, and his hand shook, spilling hot coffee onto the counter. He knew, without being told, exactly who was coming next. The old bell above the door had not rung yet. Damien held Ava's small hand under the table, steadying his own breathing. "Today you get the best waffles in this whole valley," he told her. Under the table, his fingers rested on a small signal switch. Some faint sound outside made the wind chime by the door rattle. Every head in the diner seemed to turn toward that thin, dry sound. The question hung heavy in the air. Who would walk in next? The old ceiling fan spun lazily above their booth, creaking on every turn. A fly buzzed once against the window, then went still. Ava kicked her feet under the table, humming a soft, quiet tune. Rusty refilled a coffee cup for the two locals in the corner. His hand trembled just slightly, rattling the cup against its saucer. He glanced toward the parking lot, then quickly looked away again. Outside, gravel crunched under slow, heavy tires pulling into the lot. A car door slammed shut with a hard, final sound. Boots scraped against the concrete step just outside the door. At exactly 10:45, the door swung open with a groan. Sergeant Silas Croft stepped inside, smelling of cheap cigarettes and old whiskey. His eyes swept the room and landed hard on Damien. He noticed the polished SUV parked outside, gleaming under the morning sun. Then his gaze fixed on Damien's gold watch, glinting at his wrist. Jealousy and old prejudice sparked instantly behind Croft's narrow eyes. Croft marched straight to booth 4 without a single word of greeting. He swung his arm and knocked Ava's plate clean off the table. The plate shattered on the floor, syrup splattering across old linoleum tiles. Ava screamed, grabbing her stuffed bear and pressing her face into it. Tears rolled down her cheeks as her small shoulders shook with fear. Every instinct in Damien's body screamed at him to stand up. But the mission mattered more than his own anger in that moment. He looked Croft dead in the eye, his voice low and level. "Is there a problem with my daughter's breakfast, officer?" Croft laughed, a short, ugly bark that filled the quiet room. He pulled his service pistol from its holster and set it on the table. It landed just inches from Ava's trembling little hand. He snatched Damien's wallet and pulled out 5 crisp $100 bills. "Out here, I am the law," Croft sneered through gritted teeth. "Where would someone like you get money for that watch? Call it your protection fee for today," he added, tossing the wallet back. Every ugly word, every threatening gesture, recorded in perfect 4K clarity. Croft had no idea he was building his own prison sentence. He leaned closer, jabbing a thick finger toward Damien's chest with contempt. "I want you and your kid out of my county," he barked. "People like you don't belong anywhere near Pinecrest Ridge." "My daughter didn't do anything to you," Damien said, his voice steady and low. Croft laughed again, louder this time, glancing at the frightened locals nearby. "That watch cost more than my whole paycheck," he sneered. "Explain that to me. Explain it slow, so I understand." Damien kept his hands flat on the table, palms open and calm. "It was a gift," he said simply. "Nothing more to explain, officer." Croft's face reddened, veins rising along his thick neck. He clearly wanted a bigger reaction, something to justify what came next. Damien said nothing, his face calm, as still water on a lake. That silence seemed to enrage Croft even more than any argument would. He grabbed a pair of handcuffs from his belt, metal clicking sharply. "You're under arrest for suspected theft and resisting an officer," Croft announced loudly. "Your kid goes straight to the county children's shelter this afternoon." Those words landed like a blow straight to Damien's heart. He could not, would not, let Ava vanish into a broken system. The old ceiling fan above them squeaked once, slow and tired. Somewhere in the kitchen, a coffee pot hissed against its burner. The two locals in the corner sat frozen, afraid to even breathe. Rusty gripped the counter edge, his knuckles pale and trembling badly. Every second stretched painfully long, thick with unbearable tension. Damien gently wiped a tear from Ava's cheek with his thumb. He leaned close and whispered softly into her ear. "Remember our hide-and-seek game, sweetheart? Let's play it right now. Close your eyes tight and hug Barney close," he murmured gently. "Count all the way to 60 and don't peek early, okay?" Ava nodded, sniffling, and squeezed her eyes shut immediately. The moment her eyes closed, something shifted completely in Damien's expression. The soft, gentle father vanished, replaced by cold, unshakable authority. He was no longer just a dad protecting his little girl. He slowly reached for Croft's discarded wallet and lifted his own instead. Damien opened a worn leather badge holder and set it firmly on the table. The gold shield of the State Office of Professional Integrity gleamed under the diner lights. Croft's smug grin froze halfway across his weathered, sunburned face. His mouth opened, but no sound came out at first. Damien pressed a small button hidden on the side of his watch. Somewhere outside, engines roared to life within seconds flat. Tires screeched across gravel as 3 black tactical vehicles tore through the lot. They crashed through the old wooden fence bordering Rusty's property. Wood splinters flew across the parking lot, scattering near the gas pumps. Armed state agents poured out, rifles raised and steady. Their boots hit the ground in one sharp, unified rhythm. The diner door burst open, letting in cold morning air and harsh light. Croft's hand twitched toward his empty holster out of pure instinct. It was already too late for any of that now. Croft's whole body went rigid, his face draining of color instantly. He finally understood the man he had just humiliated and robbed. This quiet father was the very man hunting corrupt officers across the state. Agents forced Croft face down onto the sticky, syrup-stained table. His own handcuffs, meant for Damien, now locked tight around his wrists. Rusty exhaled a shaky breath he seemed to have held forever. Outside, more agents secured the parking lot, weapons trained on the diner. Neighbors gathered along the road, whispering, watching the scene unfold in disbelief. Word would spread through Pinecrest Ridge before lunchtime arrived. Agent Vance stepped through the doorway, nodding once toward Damien with quiet respect. "Nice work," Vance said simply, glancing at the wreck plate on the floor. Damien only nodded back, his focus still fixed on his daughter. He walked to Ava, gently wiping dried syrup from Barney's soft ear. He lifted her into his arms, holding her close and steady. "Found you," he whispered warmly. "The game is over. I won." Ava opened her eyes and saw her father's familiar, relieved smile. She wrapped both arms tightly around his neck, burying her face there. She had no idea what had just happened around her. Outside, agents led Croft toward a waiting vehicle, his boots dragging weakly. Rusty stood in the doorway, staring at the scene with wide, wet eyes. Years of quiet fear seemed to lift off his shoulders. Damien carried Ava to the counter and set down a thick envelope. Inside sat $10,000 from the state's Witness Protection Support Fund. "Thank you for that donut," Damien told Rusty gently. "Your diner will never have to serve men like him again," he added. Rusty's hand shook as he touched the envelope, unable to speak. He simply nodded, his throat too tight for words. Later that day, investigators searched the county sheriff's office thoroughly. They found 11 buried complaints stuffed inside a locked bottom drawer. Bank records revealed years of hidden payments from local business owners. Agents also found a ledger hidden behind a loose ceiling tile. It listed every business that paid Croft's so-called protection fee. Rusty's Diner appeared on that list 11 separate times over 4 years. The evidence matched every detail from Croft's recorded confession inside the diner. Prosecutors moved quickly, building a case that would not collapse. Within weeks, 3 more deputies faced charges alongside their sergeant. Local news vans arrived within days, parking along the narrow county road. Reporters knocked on doors, asking questions people had feared to answer for years. Slowly, one by one, families began to speak the truth aloud. The widow who lost her grocery store finally told her full story. She wept as she described handing Croft cash every single month. Her testimony, paired with the ledger, sealed the case even tighter. Croft eventually stood before a federal judge, his uniform replaced by orange. The judge read the charges slowly: extortion, abuse of power, and endangerment. Croft's lawyer tried excuses, but the video evidence left no room for doubt. The judge sentenced him to 14 years in federal prison. Croft's badge, his authority, and his cruelty were finally stripped away completely. The valley that once feared his name began to breathe freely. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered around Rusty, asking for his reaction. He looked into the camera and spoke plainly, without any anger in his voice. "Justice took its time," he said, "but it finally showed up." The widow, who lost her grocery store, stood beside him, holding a small flag. She had reopened her shop just 2 weeks earlier, using state relief funds. Slowly, the whole valley began stitching itself back together. Weeks later, Rusty repainted the sign above his diner door. Business grew as families returned, no longer afraid of Sunday morning visits. He kept a small photo of Ava taped near the register. Damien returned to Nashville. With his daughter, the case finally closed. He tucked Ava into bed that night, humming her favorite quiet tune. She asked if the man from the diner would ever return. "No, sweetheart," Damien said softly, brushing hair from her forehead. "He won't bother anyone ever again." Ava smiled sleepily and hugged Barney tight against her chest. Damien sat by her bed, while longer, watching her breathe slow and even. He thought about his wife, about the promise he made at her grave. Justice had come late for Pinecrest Ridge, but came whole. He thought of Rusty's trembling hands, finally steady behind his own counter. He thought of families who no longer paid fear disguised as a fee. Quiet men like him did not need loud victories. They only needed the truth to finally reach the light. Damien turned off the lamp and sat there a moment longer. Outside, Nashville hummed softly under a calm, ordinary night sky. Some fights are won with shouting, and some are won in silence. Damien Pierce had learned long ago which kind mattered most. A father's steady hand can hold more power than any badge. And somewhere in a small Tennessee valley, people finally slept without fear. The diner's bell still rang each morning, welcoming honest customers again. Rusty's coffee still steamed, but the dread was finally gone. Months later, Nadia's hardware store reopened its doors with a fresh coat of paint. She sent Damien a short letter, thanking him for finally listening. He kept it folded inside his desk drawer at work. Rusty added a new item to his menu, a stack of waffles named after Ava. Regulars ordered it often, never quite knowing the story behind the name. Rusty always smiled a little wider when someone asked for it. He hung a small bell above the door, replacing the old rusted one. Its bright, clear ring welcomed every customer who walked through now. The diner finally sounded the way he had always hoped it would. Agent Vance closed the Pinecrest Ridge file with a short, simple note. Case closed. Justice delivered. No further action required. He filed it next to a dozen other cases Damien had quietly solved. Ava grew up knowing her father as gentle, patient, and endlessly kind. She never learned every detail of that Sunday morning in the diner. She only remembered a game of hide and seek that her father always won. Years later, on a quiet drive through Tennessee, they passed a familiar exit sign. Ava, now older, glanced at her father with curious eyes. "Dad, why do you always slow down near that turn?" Damien smiled, keeping his eyes steady on the road ahead. "Just an old memory, sweetheart. A good one, in the end." He did not explain further, and she did not push for more. Some stories stay folded quietly inside a father's heart, safe and complete. Damien never needed applause for the battles he fought in silence. He only needed his daughter safe and the truth finally free. Back in Nashville, Damien kept a small photo from that Sunday morning. It showed Ava laughing, syrup still on her chin, unaware of anything else. He kept it tucked inside his badge case, close to his heart. Every so often, a letter arrived from Pinecrest Ridge, thanking him quietly. He read each one at his kitchen table, late at night. Then he folded them carefully and placed them in a drawer. He never spoke of Croft again, not even to his closest co-workers. Some battles did not need retelling to hold their weight. The valley healed slowly, and so, in his own way, did he.